Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. On this episode, we're taking a hard look at Belarus, who is like Russia's troubled younger sibling, living in its shadow, borrowing its clothes, and desperately hoping Putin doesn't charge rent. But there's a bigger issue brewing here, and it's that the regime in Belarus is quite literally running out of Belarusians. In recent years, Belarus has faced an alarming demographic collapse. Data recently emerged after being conveniently hidden since the start of the pandemic. No surprise there. Lukashenko cheats inconvenient truth like I do with expired milk, shove it deeper into the fridge, hoping everyone forgets it's there. But the truth finally emerged, and it ain't pretty. So let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
For the first time in 4 years, Alexander Lukashenko's regime has released official birth and death statistics, and the numbers paint a grim picture of a nation in demographic crisis. According to the National Statistics Committee, just under 59,000 children were born in Belarus in 2024. That's a birth rate of 6.5 per 1,000, nearly half of what it was in 2016. It is the lowest number of births recorded since the country began tracking statistics in 1950. The data confirms what independent sources have long warned. Belarus is facing a historic population decline. And while the government has now published figures for 2024, it continues to withhold data from previous 4 years, marked by political upheaval and a pandemic. In 2024, over 115,000 people died in Belarus. That is more than double the number of births. The mortality rate stands at 12.6 per 1,000. Leaked data from the hacker collective Cyber Partisans shows that during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, deaths surged dramatically, up nearly 40% in 2021 alone. Critics say the regime deliberately concealed the scale of the pandemic. Lukashenko infamously dismissed the virus, recommending vodka, goat cheese, and hockey as cures. Meanwhile, doctors who spoke out faced arrest, exile, or worse. The result? A natural population decline of over 56,000 people in 2024, and that doesn't include the estimated 600,000 Belarusians who have fled the country since 2020, escaping repression and economic hardship.
And now let's zone in on the east-plaining portion of our show. Belarus is quietly emptying out. Since the 2020 presidential election, when Alexander Lukashenko claimed victory amid widespread allegations of fraud, the country has been gripped by political repression. Peaceful protests were met with violence, opposition leaders were jailed or exiled, and independent medias were silenced. For many, staying became too dangerous.
Belarus is quietly emptying out. Since the 2020 presidential election, when Alexander Lukashenko claimed victory amid widespread allegations of fraud, the country has been gripped by political repression. Peaceful protesters were met with violence, opposition leaders were jailed or exiled, and independent media silenced. For many, staying became too dangerous. The situation worsened as the Minsk regime aligned itself closely with Moscow, even allowing its territory to be used in the invasion of Ukraine. That move triggered harsh Western sanctions, isolating the country economically and diplomatically. Inflation soared, jobs vanished, and hope dimmed. Belarus has been also accused of using migrants from the Middle East and Africa as part of a hybrid attack on the EU, pushing them toward borders with Poland and Lithuania. This has further strained relations with the West and added to domestic instability. By 2024, over 37,000 Ukrainian refugees had also entered Belarus, putting pressure on already stretched social services. For many Belarusians, especially young professionals and activists, the only option left is to leave, seeking safety, freedom, and a future in neighboring countries like Poland and Lithuania.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Belarus's population has dropped dramatically, about to break the psychological barrier of 9 million for the first time since independence. And while Lukashenko might blame external forces, it's always external forces, isn't it? The reality is much bleaker. People are dying quicker than they're being replaced, while younger people are fleeing the country faster than a dictator fleeing accountability. Now, one of the major problems here is immigration. And let's be honest, can you blame them? The regime's oppressive policies and economic instabilities and the very real prospect of becoming a satellite puppet state makes any other place sounds quite appealing. Thousands have left since the 2020 protests were brutally crushed, seeking refuge everywhere from Warsaw to Vilnius. And it's not just the youngest generation that's leaving. Belarus is facing what's known as a brain drain, with skilled professionals, doctors, engineers, teachers, all abandoning ship. And basically, everyone you'd need to rebuild the country is already halfway through the first IKEA trip in the EU, wondering if they really need that third potted plant. But immigration isn't the only issue. Belarus's population is also aging rapidly. Over a quarter of Belarusians are pensioners. The regime's stubborn refusal to address healthcare and social welfare means elderly people are especially vulnerable, facing poverty and isolation. It's a humanitarian crisis brewing quietly under Lukashenko's nose. Oh, let's be honest, most things probably go unnoticed under that mustache. The fertility rate has collapsed too, now at historic lows. Now this despite Lukashenko's somewhat creepy obsession with encouraging young people to have babies. Remember his infamous advice during COVID, right? Vodka and sauna as remedies? Well, apparently he applies similar logic to population policy, which unsurprisingly hasn't inspired a baby boom. Turns out stable jobs and decent living conditions are slightly more effective aphrodisiacs than authoritarian speeches and forced patriotism. And all this leaves Belarus in a grim demographic spiral, one which threatens its very future. Without a younger generation staying in the country, supporting the economy, and crucially questioning the regime, Belarus risks slipping further into authoritarian stagnation. A smaller, older, and increasingly isolated population is easier for Lukashenko to control, but terrible for the country's long-term health. So, what's next? Realistically, unless there's dramatic change, politically, economically, and socially, Minsk might become an empty ghost town. The regime needs to wake up and realize that hiding statistics won't solve this crisis. Belarus don't just need more babies, it desperately needs hope, reform, and a future that young people can actually believe in. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Alina Koshik, editor-in-chief of Belsat TV. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, my pleasure.
So today we're trying to explore the situation with Belarus's dwindling population. We're looking at some really dramatic numbers here. What would you say is contributing to the issue of not just population decline, but also an aging population and the severe brain drain?
You know, Belarus is quite a closed country. We as journalists, we don't have an access to many statistics which are totally normal in a democratic world. Belarusian regime is trying to control everything, even statistics. That's why for last 4 years, National Agency for Statistics haven't published almost any information about the situation in the country. And one of the most sensitive are the issues of birth and death. And that's why these statistics from the previous year, 2024, were quite shocking for us, because we really understood that now in Belarus more people are dying than people are giving the birth to new citizens of Belarus. Moreover, from the time Lukashenko came to power, it was 1994 till 2024, almost a million Belarusians left, according to official statistics. As for brain drain, you know that from 2020, many Belarusians left the country. To be honest, we don't have the exact number of people who left the country, but the statistics we can operate is data from UN, and they say that almost 500,000 Belarusians left country. But to be honest, on my personal opinion, it's even more.
Right, like you mentioned, a lot of these numbers we are basing on is actually official statistics from Belarus, and we're talking about a country that didn't even want to publish these numbers for a couple of years. So the legitimacy of it also is being called into question as well. And how is that going to be how is that going to impact the Belarusian society as a whole going forward?
You know, Belarusian regime and Lukashenko itself, they're trying to control their society. That's why they're hiding unpleasant numbers. Also, they are hiding this data showing how sanctions, for example, influence on Belarusian economy. We know that they are not falsifying the numbers, but they are just not publishing this. And on the local level of the regions, they are, of course, collecting all the data, putting them up to the republic level, but then not revealing them. And this is like total normal situation in Belarus. Moreover, they know that in this National Agency for Statistics, there are curators from KGB. And I know that people from KGB and from republic level, they're calling to their local fellows and say, guys, these statistics we are not publishing. That's why they are like hidden the statistics about number of pensioners, number of employees in IT sphere. For example, how many forests they can sell to Russia or to the other countries, or about refinery of the oil we are receiving from Russia. There are really important statistics which are showing us the real situation in the society and in the country. That's why they are just trying to highlight only this situation, which is comfortable for current regime. Why they didn't publish information for 4 years about birth and death? Because in 2021, there was a high peak of deaths in Belarus. Never in our history after the Second World War we had such a big number of deaths. It was 177,000 people died in Belarus. And as for 2024, this is smaller number, 114,000 people. That's why they are like, you know, trying to hide these peaks. And you know that people are dying in Belarus. Belarus is dying. And as I said previously, from the start of Lukashenko rule in 1994, when we had 10 million and 0.2 in Belarus citizens, now we have just 8 million, 0.2 people. But this is just official statistics. We know that probably in their official statistics I am as well, but I'm not living in Belarus,
right,
like many people who left the country.
Now, this is a very staggering number, and as much as Lukashenko wants to keep a tight control in the country, I don't think he himself believes this is in any way, shape, or form sustainable. How is the Belarusian regime going to try and address the issue of like low birth rate, aging population, and all the demographic issues that they may try to cover, but eventually have to deal with?
I believe that now their main idea and their main challenge is to keep in power. That's why they are like giving more and more propaganda to people, not taking much consideration about economic development, for example, which is crucial for development of the country. Lukashenko doesn't care how Belarus will look like in 10 years or in 20 years. For him, his personal governance is the key. That's why what they're doing, they're trying more or less to balance on and try to keep these people who are living in Belarus in fear. We know that there were some issues, but even in this National Agency of Statistics, people from KGB came to the meeting of the people who are working in this agency and asked them to give them their own passwords to Telegram and Viber. They are controlling even your personal phones if you are an employee of this government institution. This is how they rule. They don't care about statistics, they don't care about economy. Fear is their main factor.
That's absolutely insane. I imagine like a car driving off the cliff and the driver decides, I'll probably die before the car actually goes off anyways. But is there at some point Lukashenko want to have a successor or something to pass down to his own kids? Like, because this sounds like a level of recklessness that is just, again, kind of driving the country off the cliff.
Exactly, and that's why we understood that Belarus is very close on losing independence. That's why for Belarusian democratic forces, for those activists who are fighting for independent Belarus, it is crucial to shout out loud that Belarus is still de facto independent. Of course, in reality, it's totally dependent on Russia and on Moscow, but still we are an independent country. We cannot afford us to lose the independence. That's why we have to mobilize all the societies around us, our neighbors, Americans, Europeans, to say that we as Belarusians, we choose to live in democratic and independent country. And that doesn't change, even despite of, severe repressions. Repressions from 2020, they didn't stop. Each day they're detaining people. I'm a journalist. I'm an editor-in-chief of Belsat TV. Belsat TV is broadcasting for 17 years for Belarusians in Belarusian language. We are the only Belarusian language TV channel in the world. Never we worked legally in Belarus. They didn't give us accreditation. Can you imagine this? Moreover, 12 of my colleagues are political prisoners at the moment. They're afraid of information. They're fighting with disinformation. That's why it is so important to give world to free Belarusians.
Right, so definitely this is a case where information is perhaps one of the remaining weapon that's very effective that can be wielded. Now, recently Lukashenko also came out and tried to use some patriotic slogans and to encourage women to give birth, to try to remedy the problem of low birth rate. How has that been going? And, well, I can't imagine Belarusian people being too happy with just the leader telling them, yeah, just have babies.
Yes, this is quite a funny and old-fashioned style of propaganda of giving life to more and more kids. But what I know, they're coming to universities, they're coming to schools and saying that the only purpose of woman, not only, but the main purpose of woman is to give birth. That's why they're encouraging giving birth. But to my opinion, women will give birth to the next generations if they will understand that they're living in secure society, wealthy society. This is the best reason to have big families. But in the situation that you are not sure what will be, we know that we have the war right behind us, and we are actually a part of the war as well, because we know that many military facilities are also in Belarus. That's why I think this just would not work. People are not, let's say, if I may use this word, stupid. They do understand that this is just propaganda, but sometimes they don't want to be seen as activists or opposition leaders. That's why they're coming to this meeting and saying, okay, but they're doing their things. And I know that people in young generation of Belarusians, they do understand in what society they want to live. But this kind of brain drain and that people of young generation haven't seen a future in Belarus, this is the problem. Right. Because those people who left country, it would be so difficult for them to be back after many years living in foreign countries. That's why this is a big challenge, not only for Lukashenko, but for all of us to keep Belarus independent and not dying.
Right, so in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. And again, thank you so much for your work in helping shed light on the situation. Like I said, information is indeed the best weapon here. So thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. A humble kitchen staple is now at the center of a growing crisis in Russia. President Vladimir Putin has publicly acknowledged a nationwide potato shortage as prices skyrocket and supplies dwindle.
In a rare televised admission, Vladimir Putin said Russia simply doesn't have enough potatoes. The shortage, he explained, was confirmed during a meeting with agricultural leaders, and even Belarus, a key supplier, has run dry. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko reportedly joked that his country had already sold everything to Russia and was now planting more. But the situation is no joke for Russian consumers, who have seen potato prices jump by over 160% in just 1 year. According to Rosstat, potatoes are now the fastest rising food item in the country, with wholesale prices up nearly 300%. Making Russia the most expensive potato market in the world. The government has allowed duty-free imports from friendly countries, while some regions, like Kaliningrad, have banned exports altogether to protect local supplies. Calls are now growing for temporary price controls, as lawmakers warn that the soaring cost of this second bread is putting pressure on millions of Russian families.
Russia is taking drone education to new heights, literally. A new school textbook on unmanned aerial vehicle is now part of the national curriculum, and it's linked to a company with ties to Putin's daughter.
For the first time, Russian students as young as 13 will be learning how to operate drones, not just in after-school clubs, but in official classrooms. The textbook, titled Unmanned Aerial Vehicles 8th and 9th grades, has been approved by the Ministry of Education and added to the federal curriculum. It was developed by Geoscan, a drone manufacturer with a growing presence in both the tech and education sectors, and a company that recently received investment from a foundation led by President Putin's daughter, Katerina Tikhonova. The move is part of a broader national push to train 1 million drone operators by 2030, with programs already underway in hundreds of schools and universities. The initiative comes as drones play an increasingly central role in Russia's military and technological strategy, especially since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Global demand for critical minerals like lithium and rare earth is surging, driven by the clean energy boom. While China still dominates refining, countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are gaining ground, expanding exports and striking new international deals.
The IEA's Global Critical Minerals Outlook 2025 paints a picture of soaring demand, especially for lithium, cobalt, nickel and rare earths, all essential for electric vehicles, batteries and renewable energy tech. Lithium alone saw a 30% jump in demand last year, while China remains the dominant force in refining and supply, leading in 19 out of 20 key minerals. Other players are stepping into the spotlight. Kazakhstan, the world's top uranium producer, is now eyeing the rare earths boom after announcing major new deposits. Uzbekistan too is expanding its exports of uranium and copper and recently struck a critical minerals deal with the United States, though details remain under wraps. The IEA's report also warns of growing risks tied to China's dominance. Emerging battery technologies like lithium iron phosphate and sodium ion rely heavily on materials that are almost entirely refined in China, including 95% of the world's high-purity manganese sulfate.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.